Hi guys! Today I am going to be reviewing a book. This is my first book review literally ever. I'm so excited. This is a spoiler-free review, but I do go into a little bit more detail. So if you really want to go into this novel blind, don't watch this review. And today it'll be Freshwater by Akwaeke Emezi. I don't know too much about the background of the author. I try not to know a lot about the background before I read a novel, but I did skim through some Goodreads reviews after I finished it. But today I really do want to stay impartial to that aspect of it and just talk about the novel in itself. This is a pretty short read. It's a little under 250 pages, and it also goes by pretty quickly. It didn't take me very long to finish. Once I actually got into it, picked it up, and actually sat with it and started reading it seriously. I was telling myself 2025 is the year that I really get into reading literary fiction. Little Life and My Year of Rest and Relaxation, those were two that kind of really got me into it. And so basically just kind of focusing more on the characters more than the plot, character development more than plot. And this was a great example of that as well. Kind of beginning to end is the way I would like to structure it. Overall though, before I even get into any details, and I won't be including any spoilers or anything, but before I do get into any details, I do want to talk about the overall, how the book made me feel, if I really enjoyed it, if I would read it again. I really did enjoy this book, and a lot of it really resonated with me, maturing, and the experience of modern day youth in terms of romantic culture in the modern day, identity, ideology of other cultures. A lot of those themes really resonated with me as someone who does live abroad and is experiencing the modern youth culture from different lenses. The way that the novel discusses trauma and the trauma response is overwhelmingly, extremely well articulated and creative. The author has done an amazing job personifying emotions and personifying responses to traumatic experiences that I have never seen done before. And I did see a review of someone saying that it reminds them of like an adult version of Pixar's Inside Out, and I could not agree more. I absolutely loved this, and again, those adult themes are very strong in the novel, but nothing is overwhelming in my opinion. There is like some slight, I don't want to use the word gore, but I will, slight kind of gorier things that I did like. I don't really love when that's insinuated but kind of like shied away from. I like when it's very like delicately and appropriately added in. It's not offensive. It's not overdone, but it's just a little bit explicit and a little bit like, wow. But also, it's not just thrown in there to add like gore and to be in your face. I really liked that part. Let's start with some details. So, as far as the writing went, beautifully written, beautifully articulated, like I mentioned before. But I did feel as if, and I heard someone say this as well, like, yes, it is, literary fiction, but it's a little kind of, I don't want to use the word fantasy, but you need to use your imagination with this novel for sure. You need to be able to separate yourself and enter the world of the book. If you're not really that kind of reader and you're more of like a realist, then it might not be as easy for you to do, but I do think it's still worth a try, seriously. If you can just, you know, allow yourself to be creative, allow yourself to be imaginative while you're reading this, I would absolutely recommend that. But I will say, exposition wise, setting up everything, I did have a little bit of trouble just because I wasn't expecting it. And so it did kind of take me some getting used to. It took me some, you know, really learning of the characters before I was able to really understand what was going on. And even toward the end, there were some things that I still don't quite maybe understand as well as I feel like I could have. I do think there were some things that maybe could have been a little bit better, not better explained, because like everything was pretty well explained, but maybe just dissected a little bit more. A lot of things were kind of brushed past a little bit more than I would have wanted. Some things I did want a little bit more details on. Some characters I did want to get to know a little bit more. But I do understand that the characters that were focused on were the most important. There are like, you know, multiple worlds within the story. So a lot of the characters within the real world were significant, but they didn't need much background. So you didn't really get to know them very well. You only got to know them for what was extremely, like, absolutely necessary and relevant in relation to the main character of the novel, which is great in terms of getting to the point, I guess. But sometimes, like I said, I do wish that I got to, you know, see a little bit more of the just everyday interactions between the main character and some of the real life characters. But that is where the length of the book really comes to play, and you really start to see, like, okay, like, this is why this is such a short novel. Some things aren't as dissected as other things that the main character is going through internally, which is totally fine. Like I said, the internal is more important, but it is such a long timeline that we're following the main character through, that I think that's why a lot was sacrificed, because if we did go through that long of the character's life, then the book would be closer to the length of like A Little Life, which some people did complain that novel was a bit too long and we got too many details. So I think we're just looking for a happy medium sometimes. This, I would say, was probably a bit too short. Every time I do read a shorter novel, I'm kind of wondering, like, could more have happened? And then even with my, like, newfound love for literary fiction in general, I'm very inclined to hate the endings of these novels, but then I have to really understand that this novel was really about the development of this character's acceptance to whatever they've had, whatever struggles that they've had throughout the novel, what decisions they've made throughout the course of the novel, their interactions with other characters throughout the course of the novel, and it is the author's choice which characters are important to the development of this character and which just aren't. The beginning of the novel, I did have a little bit of trouble getting into, but when it started to kick in and I started to understand, like, oh, okay, I think I see what we're talking about, I did start to like it. My favorite character was Sachi, if I'm pronouncing correctly. The human character's, the main character's human maternal figure or mother. I thought she was so just like bad and like a bad girl, like not bad girl in like a bad way, but like I thought she was like a baddie. Like she was just very smart and articulate and well-traveled and beautiful, and every time she would be brought up in a story, I was like, oh, amazing. And her character was so significant to the main character's world of characters. It kind of also made me think of themes just in general of my own life and of, you know, the common, you know, maternal exploration of the relationship between mother and child, especially when the child is going through some internal turmoil that the mother is trying so desperately to help, especially once it gets past the point into the child is now into adulthood and their decisions are their own, and there's only so much that the mother can do to help. It's so disheartening to see, but it's so realistic. And sometimes there are times where the mother does just have to step back, and the child kind of has to figure those things out on their own, especially when they are turning away the help. So I really did like to see that explored, especially as someone whose mother was born in a different country to where I was raised in. Very different culture, very different relationship, dating culture and drinking culture and all of that in relation to my mother's, or in comparison to my mother's, in contrast. Same with this. The mother had grown up completely different from how the child, the main character, grew up, and that influenced their relationship, that influenced the child's upbringing. I would chunk this novel into fourths, and I would say that the second fourth was my favorite part. The beginning wasn't my favorite. The second fourth, where there was just drama. I loved it. And where, this turmoil began, and we began seeing different aspects of different personalities within the main character, having multiple personalities, the different ones coming to the front, and exploring that, and exploring how that affected the main character's relationships in the real world, and also being introduced to their internal space where all of the other personalities lived. Extremely interesting, and just such a creative way to dive into mental illness, and just so intriguing, eye-opening as someone who doesn't know, a lot about it, and just incredibly creative. I don't know. But once we got to what I would consider the third fourth, I will say it did kind of feel like, and I hate to keep drawing comparison to other novels, but it reminded me of what happened in A Little Life, where it sort of was just, I did feel like there were some cycles that were happening. It was kind of just the same thing that just happened, but with a different person. Maybe we could have used those times to go deeper into one of those relationships, as opposed to just bringing a new one in, not really explaining it, letting it go, bringing a new one in, letting that be a quick scenario, letting it go. And then finally, once I got to the end of this novel, I just, like I said, I wasn't in love with the ending, but I can't think in my head of a better way to have ended it. So I'm gonna let it slide, because the ending was more just an acceptance than anything necessarily happening, which again is just going to be the genre. And sometimes books don't always have clear endings, and there's no necessarily, it's not an open ending. It's not open to speculation or anything. It's not, oh, maybe they got together in the end, like maybe years down. It's not anything like that. It's not Normal People, if you know what my reference there. It's just, this is the story starting here with this person, and this is where they got to this point in their life at this point. And the rest isn't up for speculation. The rest just isn't a part of the novel. And that's completely fine. Because it was still a great, beautiful ending. It was an ending of acceptance of themselves, of the character, and growth. And that's all you can ask for in a novel like this, I think. It's what I'm learning, especially after reading My Year of Rest and Relaxation. When that ended, I was like, okay, and then I really understood a little bit more. I feel like once we got to that, end of the third part for me, beginning of the fourth part for me, there are actually parts in this, but I think I'm making up my own parts in my head. But I feel like we did start to rush a little. There was a sort of for lack of a better term, like a pilgrimage back to the main character's beginnings in order to, you know, you go back to where you came from to discover who you really are and discover what to do next. Go back to the beginning, go back to where you came from. A very common theme. And it was very thrust onto the main character. There was just a lot in this period that was kind of unclear. When the main character met this other character, something happened internally with the internal characters that this was just a huge awakening for them as well. I was very confused though why it was so. It wasn't very well explained why this specific interaction was so much more intense to everyone in the novel compared to everyone else. And the result of this wasn't exactly clear to me either. It was just supposed to be a turning point, and I don't think I was able to see how that really happened. It was honestly only a few pages. That the last half of the novel, we kind of sacrificed the significance of the real life characters and how they were used was never in a way to humanize the main character, and more of these brief interactions that mostly related to the internal characters and use these interactions to further flesh out their characteristics and their journeys. I did leave the story feeling as if I didn't know much about the main character at all, truly. But again, the main character didn't know that much about themselves throughout the entire novel. I think that was the point. I think that was purposeful. As a reader, I didn't get to understand, and I didn't get to know the main character, the body, very much, because there were so many other internal characters, that this was just a human body that they lived in. I had to just kind of not be selfish in that way, and remember that this isn't necessarily, like I said, the main character's the only main character, technically. Also, in the end, we did have some more background of some things that did happen to the main character during childhood, that insinuate that a lot of the way that many things were handled throughout the entirety of the novel were due to trauma. It wasn't fleshed out. It didn't feel quite as significant at that point compared to other things that happened throughout the rest of the novel. But I will say that I think it was important to note, and that I think it did make a lot of sense once you got to that point and once you kind of thought back to the rest of the things that had happened throughout the novel. But they were kind of, it did feel a little bit randomly placed in there. But I don't say all that to knock the novel or say that it wasn't well written or that it was disorganized. Nothing like that. It was amazing, and it was something that it would be difficult to be extremely organized with the themes of the novel, because just there's multiple worlds, within the novel, and so many characters who have completely opposing personalities that it would be incredibly difficult. If I tried to sit and write this, it would be incredibly laboring. I think the author did a tremendous job with this novel. I think my qualms probably do come with the length. I think that, me saying it wasn't really fleshed out, it wasn't really explained. Some of it has to do with the genre. Some of it has to do with maybe it wasn't entirely necessary, but some of it I feel like would have definitely benefited the novel a little bit more if we had a few more pages. Would I recommend this? Yes, absolutely. I would recommend this novel. When it has, these struggles, and everyone sees these struggles so differently. Everyone feels these things so differently, especially with mental illness. It's so different for everyone. Everyone's experience is so different because we all have our own our own minds, we all have our own way of seeing these things, and although our symptoms might be, you know, similar, like foreign parents, I feel like this really resonated with me in that regard, and just feeling maybe misunderstood because how I was raised was very different from how my mother was raised, and how that affected our relationship, how trauma can really affect a person well into their adulthood. And it was just a great novel. Would I read it again? It's very, very, very rare that I will say that I would read a novel again. I'm never opposed to, but if I liked a novel enough, one time was enough, and I'm happy with that. Just a great read, and it's not long. Absolutely read it. And that is Freshwater by Akwaeke Emezi. So thank you guys so much for watching. Like I said, I will be doing some more reviews. I'm also considering doing a little book club, so let me know if you want to see that. I will probably, if I do that, I'll make another video talking about how I kind of want to do it, and how I'll have deciding on books and everything like that we do read. But please leave me a recommendation for a book to read just by myself on my own that I'll review as well. Like I said, I'm really trying to read more literary fiction. I really want to do more gothic horror, like classics. Also, I've really been wanting to do little reviews on films as well, same themes. Like now that Nosferatu is out, I really was like, oh my goodness, like I would have loved to sit and just dissect this film. So if you have any interest in that, it would probably be those similar themes, you know, gothic horror films, just classic films. I love film and I love literature, so I absolutely want to talk more about it, and I would love to hear your opinion in the comments. If you read this book, if you liked it, how you thought, if you really agree with me, or if you really are like, no, you missed the mark with this one, I'm sorry queen, like you're absolutely wrong, then feel free to let me know. But I am gonna go ahead and end it there. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one.